Hi guys! Today we'll be recapping a story called My Angelic Husband is Actually a Devil in Disguise. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Enjoy! Setia Poine has just graduated from the academy and is about to take the exam to become a government official. For all she's concerned, she is ready to take on the world. But the world is hardly fair, for despite all her years in pursuing education, all her family wants her to do is to marry into a harem. And guess what? It is supposed to be her payment to her parents for raising her. Her family has served as a knight to the House of Halogen, but their title is not hereditary. To maintain their status, her father grovels to gain favor from the nobles they serve. In doing so, he accumulates more and more debts by spending money they didn't have. Since her father is against her becoming a knight, Setia paves her own way. She wins a scholarship and works part-time jobs, all so she can graduate. After all this effort, she is not about to let her family sell her off to pay their debts. That is how she finds herself at the employment agency. She is more than willing to pay back her parent for raising her, but she has no idea where she'll even get the money. Unexpectedly, salvation comes in the form of a badly dressed man who suddenly enters the establishment. Shortly after the man has arrived, Setia is informed that there is a job available for her. The mysterious man is willing to hire her. When she comes face to face with the guy, though, she realizes that she knows him. It's Miere Lunaria. He was a year ahead of her in the academy and is famous for being at the bottom of his class, scoring 0 in all his exams. Not to mention that he also has some questionable fashion sense. And now, he is supposed to be her new boss. The two of them begin their formal discussion, and Lumiere goes through her credentials. He then tells her that he has too much money on his hands, and he also adds that he is a count. With that in mind, he points out that he needs someone competent like her by his side since he's not very clever. When Setia asks what exactly the job is, he answers that he wants her to manage his family assets. At first, she thinks that he needs a personal assistant, but this is not the case because he continues that he needs her to be his wife. I can totally understand why Setia took some time to process that. After all, it's not every day that you go apply for a job and get a marriage proposal instead. If only life were that easy. Setia can't believe what she heard. After all, even though he is a count, Miere Lunaria is considered to be terrible husband material. The prospect of being a countess is better than being sold into a harem, but she hates dummies. Oh, that's harsh. I mean, I'm sure he has some good qualities. Just look at him. He's adorable. Her train of thought is interrupted when he explains that it will only be a contractual marriage. Setia is relieved, but she is still curious about why he would even want a fake marriage when he can just have a real one, especially if he wants to have children. Somewhat shyly, he replies that he doesn't want to have children for personal reasons and has decided to pass on his title to the child of the first prince, who is his cousin. Setia figures that this makes sense. And so, what he really needs is a business partner, and he intends the contract to last for 4 years. Of course, he will allow her to think about it for some time. He informs her of the beautiful roses at the Lunaria estate and how he wants to enjoy them with her. But before he can leave, Setia makes it known that she wants to watch the roses bloom with him as well. Now that they are in agreement, the two of them sit down to discuss the terms. They discuss the monthly wages of 10 million lin, as well as the severance package of 500 million. If ever there is a breach of contract, there would be a payment of thrice the agreed amount. Wow, this dude is loaded! When asked if he wants to add something, he answers that it should be written that the two of them should do their marriage duties. Naturally, Setia panics because what else could that possibly mean? But then he continues by saying that he wants them to look like a real couple, so they must eat meals together, and there should be no paramour on the side. He is also particularly happy to hear that she doesn't have a lover yet. I wonder why. He also wants to include the part about them watching the roses bloom in the contract, much to Setia's bewilderment. He is so random and cheerful. Ugh, it's too early for me to want to hug him. After all that, he tells her that she can now plan her dream wedding. But ever the practical person, she wants to skip the ceremony to save money. Setia then tells him that if anyone asks why they skipped it, he should reason that it's because she had cut ties with her family. He retorts that they can just say that it's because he has no one to invite. He then turns to leave with the excuse of tending to his garden, leaving a rather amused Setia. She can't believe that he is childishly competing with her to see who has the less people to invite. But then she hears his voice again, and she is startled to see him peeking behind the door. He then tells her that since they have skipped formalities, this is supposed to be their wedding night. Later on, they are preparing for bed, and Miere gallantly offers that he'll take the sofa. Unfortunately for him, Setia is rather distracted by his loose-fitting sleepwear because, my god, she can see his glorious chest. When she finally gets her senses back, she argues that he is too tall for the sofa, so she ends up suggesting that they share the bed and use a curtain to split the bed down the middle starting tomorrow. The adorable Count enthusiastically compliments her cleverness, and she is quite flustered that she is being praised so easily. When they are lying side by side, Setia thinks about how he did not take advantage of her situation at all, and even tells him that he is not required to be so kind to her since he is her boss. When she is asleep, Miere stares at her for a while with an endearing smile. Later on, Karen, his assistant, informs him of the amount of debt Setia's family is in. We finally see the Count's true color. Upon hearing how she is treated by her own family, the Count's entire demeanor becomes menacing, signaled by the tapping of his fingers. Karen is pretty much aware that he was plotting something sinister. Nonetheless, the Count withholds himself, remembering that they are still Setia's family. Suddenly, Setia comes knocking in the office, and Miere instantly changes character, becoming docile and dim-witted once again. He greets Setia happily and even pretends to stagger for the show. When Karen helps him up, he menacingly whispers to his assistant to get lost. Also, his wife will fuss over him. Ugh, this shift in personality is so eerie. They were enjoying their meal when suddenly Miere leans towards her. Setia is naturally startled, but he is just wiping the crumbs off her face. However, she is surprised when he playfully licks his fingers. OMG. She realizes that he may be more of a rake than he lets on. Eventually, Setia gets to sort through the documents of the Lunaria fiefdom, and man is it a mess. She notes that he needs more lessons in mathematics and grammar, but this is nothing to her because all this work means that she is finally free from the clutches of her family. After a while, the gleeful voice of her husband interrupts her. He has come to introduce her to her personal maid, Rainey Sonar. The maid gives her the most enthusiastic greetings, but Setia can't help but notice that she looks young. The Count then offers that they go to the greenhouse since she looks so stressed poring over the books for the last few days. After a brief cutesy pleading from Miere, Setia agrees, thinking that the contract does require them to look like a loved-up couple. The Count even gestures that they hold hands. He is honestly adorable. I mean, they weren't kidding. He really is so angelic. In the garden, she notices beautiful yellow wildflowers, so she asks him about it. He explains that he keeps them in the garden because he finds them pretty, a rather unusual behavior for a noble since others do not tolerate wildflowers. The two of them take a closer look, and Miere tells her that the flower is called the sunset flower. Later on, the two of them continue their tour of the garden. He even drags her along to see the vegetables, adorably chattering all the way. Later on, the two of them settle for some tea. He tells her that he will be going to the royal palace the following day to see the crown prince, so he asks her to take care of the estate while he is gone. She agrees and wishes him safe travels. Then, out of nowhere, he thanks her for agreeing to be his wife, causing her to blush like a ripe tomato. When she goes back to work after the quick break, she glances at the potted sunset flowers that the Count gave her, and she can't help but smile fondly. I think this little contract marriage is getting a tad bit serious, don't you think, guys? Night comes, and we see Miere getting out of bed while Setia is still asleep. He stands to look at her for a while before turning to leave, vowing that this will not be their final goodbye. Setia is sending the Count off, and as usual, he is being dramatic, saying that this is the first time they'll be apart since their marriage. But then, to her surprise, the Count kisses her on the cheek, and when he leans back, Setia's entire face is colored red, especially when Miere tells her that he'll miss her even though he'll only be gone for a day. Before he enters the carriage, he tells her that he'll be back soon, and she smiles at him while telling him to be safe. As she watches his carriage drift away, she tries to control her emotions and remind herself that it is only part of their marital duties. She busies herself the entire day with the affairs of the estate, but when night comes, she begins to worry. The Count has yet to arrive because he usually tends to his garden around this time. She wonders if something has happened. Suddenly, there is a series of knocks on her door, along with a frantic call for her attention. It is Rainey, and she has brought some awful news. Her eyes widen upon hearing it, and she instantly feels faint. Her husband, Count Miere, has been found dead, attacked by bandits, they said. OMG, how could this happen? I did not see this coming at all. 3 years have passed since the sudden death of Miere. The roses start to flourish in May and go into full bloom in June, just like her husband has said. For a long time, she has gotten used to watching the roses alone, But it will soon come to an end because in 8 months, the contract will expire. One of her duties as countess is to deal with trade. She goes to the kingdom of Chae across the ocean, for instance. In one of her visits there, a delegation from Aliere has come to see her. She's been informed that the next emperor awaits her return. Apparently, there's been a coup d'etat. Whoa! This story really is going all out. There is so much chaos. Anyway, the crown prince and the third prince have apparently rebelled against the crown, and the emperor passed away amidst the chaos. The first prince is able to defeat them and execute those who participated in the coup. The whole thing makes Setia uneasy, but she still instantly orders Reni to pack their things for their departure. They arrive back at the capital to see the coronation of the new emperor. The emperor addresses his people and shares how his life has been in danger even before the rebellion. Not just his, but his mother's as well, Miere Lunaria and her only family, the Count of Lunaria. He revealed that the Count and Countess of Lunaria have been murdered by the ex-empress, which means that the life of Count Miere has been in danger as well. Right then, a figure in white walks towards the crowd as the emperor explains that the death of Count Miere is just a trick to avoid assassination attempts and to help him ascend to the throne. He pronounces that the king is now the new Duke of Aliere. Amidst the chaos, Setia cannot believe her eyes. All this time, her husband is alive. The crowd is astonished as well. They are having a hard time believing that the supposedly dead count is not standing before them, alive and well. Imagine what Setia is actually feeling at the moment. She is so shocked that she can't seem to move, believing this is all a dream, especially since she has held a funeral. Could it be that God is consoling her for her loss by making her hallucinate? Meanwhile, Miere finally locks eyes with his wife, and the first thing he notices is that a man beside her is constantly smiling at him from before. His gaze becomes icy, not appreciating the man's presence, but he has to go before the emperor first. While the crowd is distracted, the man calls out to Setia, looking conflicted. This man is Roinus, and she has met him in the Chae kingdom. He was one who helped her when some pickpocket had stolen her belongings at the port. One look from her is all it takes for him to be besotted by her. Well, not all of us can be as gorgeous as you, Setia. Look at her, enchanting handsome men wherever she goes. It turns out that he was also the head of the merchant group that she wanted to do business with, by selling the rose candy made from the famous roses at the Lunaria estate. He even toured her around the kingdom, and they soon became fast friends. During one of their walks, he witnessed how her health was deteriorating out of exhaustion. He worried that she was overstretching herself since she personally went to wipe out the bandits that killed her husband. She assured him that she was fine, but he reminded her that being healthy was part of her job too. He expressed that he wants her to be happy. Back in the present, the same man now looks desperate as he tries to get Setia's attention, reminding her that they were supposed to have tea. However, when Setia does not respond, he tells her that she spent a mere month with her husband, whilst he has been with her for 2 years. He then begs her to choose him. OMG, this is getting intense! For Setia, it was not only a mere month. The little time she had spent with Miere gave her the motivation to live her life to the fullest. Right as she is recalling all the wonderful times she had with Miere, a voice calls out to her. Lumiere is finally standing before her, and he shows his signature cutesy smile. Setia then tells Roinus that they will have tea some other time. Ouch. I don't know about you guys, but that certainly looks like she already has a choice. Roinus is taken aback, but agrees with her graciously. He leaves, but not before sharing a glare with Miere. The couple is now left alone, and there is an awkward silence between them, which is understandable because how else would you react when your supposed dead husband is now standing next to you? When she finally speaks to tell him that they should speak at home, he jolts out of fright, but agrees nonetheless. However, in the carriage, the silence still continues as both of them are at a loss for words. With much hesitation, Setia finally asks him what really happened. She reminds him that he promised to treat her with respect as if she were his real wife, and yet he still did not tell her that he was alive. Setia knows that he doesn't know how devastated she was about his death. Noticing his silence, Setia's sadness turns to anger, so she punches him in the chest for not looking at her or saying anything. When he continues to turn his melancholic eyes downwards, she yells that he is a bad person and terribly irresponsible. She blames him for leaving her to fend for herself. Miere continues to be silent, thinking about how he couldn't tell her that he was alive even if he wanted to. He wanted to have both his revenge and Setia, and so he did what he did. During the time they were together, he made sure to leave an impact on her. In case he truly did perish, he wanted her to remember him. When he was away, he learned about how much she had suffered. He was caught off guard that she was devastated by his death. He breaks his silence, offering her his most sincere apology for making her suffer. He explains that he did it to avenge his family, and he didn't want her to be in danger. Setia is struggling to hold her resolve, but in the end, she sighs, admitting that she was just emotionally drained. However, to her surprise, he kneels before her, apologizing profusely. He even begs her not to leave him. Aw, he looks like a puppy begging for forgiveness. I don't know about you, Setia, but I could never stay mad at that face. Setia looks down at him for a while and sighs. She points out that the former Count, now the Duke, is not very clever. She explains that she can't actually leave because she's still bound by the contract. Realizing that that part of the contract becomes his saving grace, Miere grins in relief, much to the annoyance of the still pissed-off Setia. She makes him swear to always tell her where he is going in advance and tell her if he feels like he's in danger. She emphasizes that even if she's just his contractual wife, she still has the right to know his whereabouts. The angel, Miere, agrees with her without hesitation. After a while, she asks him to go back to his seat, for he can't kneel forever. But he admits that he'll do it if it means that she'll feel better. Oh, MG. Not only does he look adorable, but he also has a way with words. I am melting. Suddenly, the carriage rattles because of a bump on the road, and he gets shoved towards her. Annoyed, Setia asks him to take a seat for the sake of the servants who might see their duke in such a state. They now sit side by side, and the awkwardness has returned. Slowly, he reaches for her hand, but then she suddenly blurts out that she misspoke when she said that he wasn't clever. He brushes this off, saying that he'd rather that she be honest with him. After all, she did agree to marry him because she knows he is lacking. He declares how glad he is for it. She studies his pleasant smile for a while and blurts out laughing. The Duke is overjoyed to see her smiling again, confessing that her smiles make him happy. When he begins telling her how wonderful her smile is, she makes him stop out of embarrassment. Aww, they're such a cute couple. Later on, Miere asks about the man she was with earlier and why they are calling each other so familiarly. Someone is jealous, I can tell. She explains Royness' identity as well as his role in their trade and clarifies that they address each other formally because they are the same age. When they arrive at their home in the capital, Miere remarks about the flourishing rose garden. Setia happily tells him that it is the same at their estate. However, she notices him staring at her. When she asks what's the matter, he suddenly embraces her. He tells her how he missed her and squeezes his wife so tightly. He must really miss Setia for him to act like this. Oh, to be in the arms of someone like Miere. He only lets go when she complains that she can no longer breathe. He apologizes afterwards, stating that he was just carried away. Unfortunately for Setia, her being flustered does not end here, especially when he takes some of her hair and kisses them. He even tells her that he can perform his knightly duties now. With an air of confidence that seems to be borderline crossing into arrogance, the old Count-turned-Duke Miere pledges that he can perform his supposed knightly duties now. Naturally, this leaves Setia a little bit frozen in place because of how brazenly he said those words with a straight face. Anyhow, she starts going on about how she missed him when he disappeared without a trace. Before Setia could finish, however, Miere pulls her in for a tight hug, apparently happy at the thought that she did long for him in his absence. Although when he asked to what extent did she miss him, she started playing coy at first, even though her initial answer in her thoughts was that she did miss him so very much. With a little bit of prying, though, Miere manages to finally get his wife to admit it, grinning and blushing as she did so. But rather than be part of the mood, Setia gets an annoyed look on her face, expressing how upset she is when her supposed dead husband appeared out of nowhere, despite the fact that she really did long for him all this time. With a heavy yet guilty slump, Miere could only apologize. Word of his return has started spreading towards his estate, brought upon by his workers and employees who are able to see him return with their lady Setia. Of course, not a lot of people believe their colleagues initially, and even poor Rainée gets told that she may have mixed the lines between dreams and reality when she told her fellow workers of their lord's return. She urges them to see for themselves, which they gladly did, even betting on whether or not the current news is from Renée's delusion. Complete shock and bewilderment hits their faces as they see that she was, in fact, telling the truth. The lord they've entered servitude into is standing right there in the garden that he loves with his wife. They all understandably express their emotions rather loudly, much to Miere's annoyance. And when she sees her husband apparently getting a headache, she calmly orders their servants to allow their master a bit of rest first, in spite of their excitement to see him again. Her wise, stern, yet gentle attitude makes Miere smile, though he himself gets sent to their bedroom chambers for his rest as well. There, when Setia tries to excuse herself in order to go attend some matters after Miere has been tucked in bed, the latter decides to plead with her to stay in their room, if she can do her work here. The childlike manner that he takes when talking to her strikes Setia the same way as a puppy with large, cute, puffy eyes, which is why she can't refuse. She starts to work at a table next to their bed, but after the urging of her husband, she sets it down and goes into bed with him. There, they talk about catching up with one another, and Miere asks her about war against the bandits and him saying sorry for what he did. Eventually, though, he gets something stuck in his eye, and Setia, out of curiosity, asks him why he wears his bangs so low. In his childish nature, Miere's answer as to why he wears his hair down to the point of covering his eyes is because it is his style. His style doesn't go too far with Setia based on her reaction, though, because she can't believe that his unkempt appearance actually counts as stylish to him. Miere seems to pick up on her distaste for his hair, which makes him slump out of the blue. But Setia is quick to say how she respects whatever preferences her husband may have. And speaking of preferences, he asks what is hers when it comes to men's hair. Perhaps hinting at the tiniest amount of jealousy, he asks whether the lady prefers long hair on men, just like her merchant friend. It's cute how the glimpse of jealousy and his childish attitude manages to come out in situations one least expects. Thankfully, Setia doesn't manage to pick up on this and merely says she doesn't think about it that much. But what she does know is what she doesn't like, which is Miere's shabby appearance. Of course, Setia doesn't say this out loud, instead choosing to say that it's the fit on the person that counts. And so the topic of conversation eventually leads to catching the former count up to current speed about the affairs of his estate in his absence. Afterwards, though, the couple decide to take a bath before turning in for the night. Separately, of course, as evident with Miere in the bath by himself. Despite his demeanor with Setia and his passive attitude most of the time, his eyes remain as sharp as ever, and a hint of a more confident personality seeps through as he forms a tiny smirk while leaving the bathroom. None of this is present, however, when he tries to go to sleep after being fully dressed. With his hair still wet, his wife naturally forbids him from climbing onto the bed, but she instead offers to dry his hair for him. In doing so, Setia manages to catch a glimpse of Miere's true features, as after his hair has been properly taken care of and brushed, it reveals a handsome face underneath. This makes Setia wonder how he can possibly cover up such heavenly features. Anyway, with him done, Miere suggests that they do it the other way around. However, in a rather peculiar moment, his hands manage to find Setia's. But in a split second, she slaps it away, perhaps based solely on instinct. Trying to clear the air, she again reiterates how His Grace, Miere's new title as Duke brings a new set of formalities, cannot manage to dry a woman's hair. But he keeps on insisting, and so she relents, and he actually does a good job of it, though. He gets a little sidetracked, however, when he sniffs in the scents of his wife's hair. Knowing it to be the scent of roses, Miere mentions how he truly goes crazy for such a fragrance, much to Setia's shyness, and she blushes. That seems to end the night on a good note, and so the two exchange pleasantries before turning in for the night. Unfortunately, as Setia pulls back the curtain, what he sees after makes Miere form an annoyed and rather confused expression on his face. It turns out the thing that got the wrong kind of attention for the new Duke is none other than the very curtain that they used to separate their own giant bed into each of their own sides. Now that they aren't in their estate, Miere hopes it would be a problem for him, but alas, here it is again. Setia tries to feign ignorance, but she's actually the one who brought it because of her liking to curtains in general. Knowing he cannot do anything about it, he has no choice but to again greet his wife goodnight. However, even after doing so, he remains standing in front of the bed, apparently gathering strength to speak his mind. When Setia asks him what's wrong, though, after a moment he changes his mind, says it's nothing, and climbs into the bed while facing the other way from her. It seems he wants to sleep with her without any curtains in the way. Anyway, just a few moments later, Miere twists and turns himself away from the bed, only to stand and observe his wife sleeping from her side. To his relief, she still falls asleep the moment her head touches her pillow, a fact that makes him smile. Remembering their conversation in the carriage on the way to their mansion, he thinks about what Setia had said about him, and this time, he vows never to leave her side again. But it seems he's far from sleepy, and his focus is somewhere else. Miere walks out of their room and asks Rainey to come with him, as the maid is stationed waiting right outside their door. Immediately upon sitting down, the first thing that comes out of his mouth is asking the maid how come she has failed her job. It turns out, he has bid her to take note of everything that happens with Lady Setia, so he asks how she manages to miss the foreigner who's supposedly friends with his wife in Rainey's monthly reports. Even though Rainey puts it as just a lady having a new friend, Miere knows better, as he had seen him put his hands on his wife, a married woman, and had asked her to choose him instead of her husband. But just like how childish Miere gets, Rainey's reason for this supposed betrayal is the fact that Royness brought her some spicy rice cakes. After getting over how perplexed he is with her answer, he finally asks about the details of this man. Rainey straightens and proceeds to essentially praise Royness, not because of popularity or choice, but because that is exactly his personality. He is a good person to boot. His real name is Xiao Chungyun, but he goes formally by Royness, and he is the leader of the Moon Merchant Group. He has long been considered the prize bachelor of Chae, which is the exact opposite of the image that Miere portrays, that of terrible husband material. Why does he pretend anyway? Nonetheless, out of all the things Rainey says, what sticks with him the most is the fact that Royness tried to confess his feelings by kissing Setia on the cheeks, though thankfully his wife clearly recognizes him only as a friend. Miere lingers in the room after he dismisses Rainey, tapping the chair he sits on as he thinks about how he's not going to live a mundane life with a rival trying to get Setia. The bright early morning sun fills the bedroom with light as the alarm clock rings through, signaling the inhabitants to rise awake. Setia is first to come back from sleep, shutting off the alarm as she does so. But to her surprise, once she manages to get her bearings, she finds it a little surprising that Miere has slept through right into her side of the bed. She finds this peculiar because he's never done so before, and is usually not that of a heavy sleeper type. But soon enough, all those thoughts disappear from her mind as her eyes give upon her husband's face, being reminded of how angelic his features are. Still, she shakes her head to snap out of it, thinking about the matters needing her attention. First of which is her training. Now clad in a comfortable sword-fighting attire, Setia clutches her sword with confidence and ease, suggesting a long history of handling such a weapon. She practices thrusts, slashes, and any other sort of swordsmanship in their training room, with each stroke of attack just as good as any. Her concentration and her solitude is broken, though, when Miere comes to see her train. She actually doesn't mind him doing so and proceeds to go about her business. Unfortunately, she doesn't get to show him that much of her skills, as she immediately feels unwell, something that she lets her husband know when he gets close to her. The truth is, she doesn't even have enough strength left to properly stand, having to lean on Miere's chest in order to do so. Naturally, Miere calls doctors to examine his wife and finds that she has caught a cold and a very high fever from overworking. He asks her to stay bedridden and to get her rest, to which Setia reluctantly agrees. However, it's in this moment when Setia wakes up from her sleep and sees the Duke with papers in his hands that she gets to admit to herself her fears. It turns out she values her relationship with Miere because she has never felt safe with anything or anyone except him. She doesn't want him to get good at handling his estate, simply because it's what he hired her for, and she's afraid it's the only reason she's there in the first place. Setia drifts in and out of sleep, so much so that she forgets the time. Miere, being the attentive husband that he is when it comes to her, finds himself right by her bedside. He asks her whether or not she had been dreaming, because apparently she had talked in her sleep, calling him a fool. Setia is quick to dismiss it though, owing it to the fact that her body's been sleeping and waking up a lot, hence why it doesn't function properly. Nonetheless, she asks the Duke what he was doing sitting and going through papers, to which his answer is that since he's been away a long time, it's only right that he catches himself up on the current handlings and situation of his estate. In turn, his wife bids him to rest when it gets dark, but internally, Setia is thinking that it's her job he's doing, again referring to her fear. But actually, Miere only bids her to take care of her body more often since it's been screaming for rest unknowingly. He also argues that it's also part of her job. A sense of relief washes over her as Setia confirms that she will do what her husband had said. Unfortunately, it would seem that she finds it hard to follow her husband's request a little bit more than she actually says. This is evident by the fact that after waking up first again, Setia gets up to check her temperature. The good news is, her fever went down a little bit. To her surprise, immediately after using a thermometer, she finds Miere awake as well, with his eyes gazing at her much like a wolf on his target. But his gaze turns soft anyway as he asks for the results of the thermometer. She says her temperature has gone down a little bit, and so she's ready for work. Her only valid excuse is because her body has told her so. And so Miere, who is still worrying about his wife, has no choice but to carry his wife back to their bedroom, where he sets her down in the bed. The following morning, thankfully, saw further improvement in Setia's condition, so much so that she asks for a trip to the garden, and naturally, Miere happily accepts. In front of the almost blooming roses and the fresh air, the couple experiences a multitude of emotions. Of course, started upon by Miere himself. He bids their maids-in-waiting to give them a little bit of distance so they could have a little privacy as husband and wife. For Setia, though, her mind wanders into the fact that Miere's body is well built for a guy that doesn't train. That is, until out of nowhere, he professes that he'd like to kiss her. Thoughts swirl inside her head, as indeed, it is the most romantic time for them to do so, after finally being together after 3 years. Miere says he'd like to kiss her on her lips, but settles for her cheeks instead in case she isn't comfortable. He leans in, brushes her hair as he does so, and kisses her gently. Unfortunately, he gets a sense a moment later that he has placed his wife in an awkward situation. Setia is left wondering as to what Miere might have meant about the whole "must have felt awkward" comment, but he only attributes it to self-talking, and mainly because he thinks she felt awkward when he leaned in for a kiss. Of course, Setia admits that she didn't feel any sort of negative feeling from the kiss, but what she didn't say is that her heart had started racing for the moment she thought Miere was going to kiss her on the lips. What a missed opportunity there, Miere! Anyway, as they hold hands and walk through the paths lined with beautiful roses growing in tall bushes, Setia can't help but think how she seems to be dating someone very innocent. However, with that wonderful, sweet feeling also comes dread and despair. Negative emotions that are brought upon the realization that all of this is going to come to an end with their contract nearing its expiration. They wouldn't get to see the roses bloom again next year, and she's also pretty sure that based on his declarations and mannerisms, Miere is finally ready to have children and subsequently take on a real wife. What she doesn't understand, though, is why she feels restless inside as the time draws near. Meanwhile, not realizing the deep thoughts that run through her mind, Miere asks Setia for the afternoon tea they've promised each other right there in the garden full of rose blooms. Setia, thinking how they might not have enough time for such a leisure, initially shows doubt at accepting. But seeing her husband slump again from hoping to have this time with her, she eventually accepts, and willingly at that. After their tea and after Setia has been guided back to their bedroom quarters to continue her rest, Miere finds himself doing one of his most sought-after hobbies, gardening. Actually, he spends most of his time caring for and attending to his crops, and even one of his servants actually wishes for him to have been born as a farmer instead of a noble. He's only busy with them as of now because he's gathering fruit to hand-feed Setia himself, after a little bit of sweet convincing from him, of course. Finally, Setia recovers well enough to work, and so Miere decides to tell her about the recent developments of him being appointed as a duke. He relays that he has removed the ceremony for his appointment, something Setia approves of, and he has also denied the reward of land from the newly crowned emperor, a decision she doesn't like. His only reason for refusing it is actually because she's been far too busy as it is. But still, from a business standpoint, she urges him to go back and accept the lands. The richer the soil, the better. And so, happily listening to his wife, he goes to request an audience with the emperor, in which he asks exactly what Setia had told him. Choosing to drop formalities, both the emperor and Miere talk as casually as colleagues, up to the point that the latter seems to be demanding the former's old offer back. The emperor merely laughs it off, but asks why he's asking for it now, when he was so adamant that he wouldn't accept it when it was first offered to him. Based on their previous conversation, he had planned to give him the former fiefdom of the empress's family, the Marquise of Ulaid, but Miere had refused. It comes as a little bit of a shock for the emperor for him to deny his rewards, saying that it should be a proper enough time for him to drop his dim-wit facade. Miere only cited that as of now, he hardly has any time with his wife, and adding more land creates more work for her to be busy. Besides, his reward is that he got his revenge against those who murdered his parents. That line alone makes his absence for 3 years a whole lot more mysterious and interesting. Anyway, Miere's answer as to why he suddenly wants it back is both plainly simple and romantic. It's because of his wife. Again, the emperor seems amused by this and says that he'll give the duke whatever he wants, even the rich farmlands in the south. With their business done, the two start their farewells, with the emperor declaring to his friend that he's happy seeing him in good hands. Meanwhile, Miere says to the emperor to let him know when his services will be needed, casually revealing that all along, Miere is actually an assassin. A big reveal that finally explains his apparent well-trained body. Before he leaves, though, the emperor asks if he's going to visit a certain woman held captive as their prisoner, but the rage from Miere's face says otherwise. With the lands now granted to them, Miere asks what his wife plans to do, to which Setia happily says that she plans to grow crops from Chae in order to make dishes from that region as a way of promoting tourism in their fiefdom. Nonetheless, she says she has to meet with Royness because of their promise to sit down for tea, but Miere says that it will be weird if people will see her, a married woman, going out with someone else in a public place. In fact, she only plans to sit him down so she could reject his feelings as gently as possible. And so, either with jealousy or not, Miere suggests they instead invite Royness for tea in their estate. Looking at Miere with such gleaming eyes, Setia now thinks that he is such a kind-hearted person. Who's gonna tell her? She continues to scribble on a paper, but suddenly flinches as Miere points out the usual flower pot on her desk, the one he gave to her before he disappeared. Setia argues that she just likes flowers and that there's no other meaning to it. Miere isn't delving into further details because she won't give an answer anyways. So he strides off to the sofa and hums happily. When asked why he's in a good mood, he tells her that he's just excited to host her friend in their estate. I doubt that. I'm having trust issues with this man. The next morning, Setia wakes up with the sight of her husband, who rolls out to her side of the bed again. Shortly after Setia is done with her training, she returns to the office and asks if Miere slept well last night. Of course he did. He managed to roll over her side of the bed. Thinking that he's doing it unconsciously, Setia decides to create a barrier with pillows under the curtains. Miere isn't rebelling about it for now. Setia notices that he's holding a newspaper, reading the current news about a marquise and 2 counts who were attacked last night by an unknown assailant. The attacker left no trace, and the attack was so sudden and violent with no witnesses nearby. The police believe that it was a calculated attack, and because of that, many nobles are shaking in fear that they might be the next target. Miere is shaking while reading the news, but at the back of his head, he actually was responsible for it. Hours have passed, and Roinus finally arrives in the estate. The couple greets him as Roinus presents a white porcelain jar from Chae as a gift to the lovely couple. Miere expresses his gratitude, but at the same time, he wanted to throw it out of his sight. As they settle down to talk about things, Miere asks him how they got acquainted. Setia answers this question first, saying it's all about business-to-business things, also referring to Roinus by his name. Roinus, on the other hand, didn't miss to make it all flowery and confusing, to which Setia always clarifies. Just then, Miere understands what Roinus is trying to say, expressing that they are soulmates and that her heart sings when he's with her. Setia agrees with his remarks, reminiscing how he compliments her on everything she does. And well, she lives for compliments, and he needs her more than anything in this world. In fact, he's given her everything she ever needed. Feeling satisfied, Miere gets up and excuses himself, leaving both Roinus and Setia. Before leaving, Miere kisses her cheek, which makes Roinus dejected. Boy, by now you should know your place. We can't afford more news of an unknown assailant. As soon as Miere closes the door, Roinus then gets serious about how he meant every word he said to her back then, further emphasizing how human emotions can't be suppressed in an instant. Miere is just behind the door listening to their conversation. He gets agitated about the fact that he boldly says things to a married woman. Although Setia agrees that they can stay friends, Roinus still manages to talk about how Miere's only good at farming, and that he has a few loose screws. Setia isn't very tolerant when someone talks about her husband that way. And so she starts defending him, saying that she likes Miere's purity and innocence. She's the type to calculate everything, even her emotions, and that's exactly why she respects her husband. Roinus insists that she has a lot on her plate already, but Setia doesn't feel burdened at all. In fact, it's the reason why she's living a good life far away from her parents' abuse. She didn't stop there. She further exclaims with a beaming smile how Miere is also good in bed. She even claims that she struggles to keep up with his stamina. Miere, who is still eavesdropping on their conversation, feels proud of his wife. She really puts him in his place. Just when Roinus is about to come out of the room, Miere dashes out to the office, reaching for a pen as he slams it on the document. He did a thorough investigation about Roinus, but he is so clean that it makes him sick. But for sure, he's bound to have a few skeletons in his closet. Miere just has to find one. Oh, this is what I'm talking about. You should have just kept all your feelings for yourself, Roinus. After that, Setia orders Rennie to buy some pillows, but Miere just stares at her servant with a warning look on his face. She better not find one, or else her life would be in danger. Miere then volunteers to handle the matters within the household, but Setia insists, overthinking that since her husband isn't good with numbers, he might end up spending too much and might also mess up the inventory list. He then resorts to his charms and starts acting pitiful. Setia comforts him by saying that he is warm and kind-hearted, just what she likes about him. I sometimes feel bad for Setia's innocence of her husband's silliness. He then squeezes her hand and kisses it. It's the hand that used to work so hard for his estate, only to get blood all over it because of him. These hands. It means more to him than she could ever imagine. Setia blushes at his remarks and decides to dash out. When Rennie breaks the news that the pillows are all sold out in the market, suddenly someone screams from the other room. When one of his men reports to Setia about what happened, Miere has a grinning look on his face. It turns out there are bed bugs in the beddings and they have to burn it all. It wasn't limited to one guest room, but in every single one in the estate. And so Setia decides to conduct a deep cleaning within the premises. Suspicious, right? Miere, who's behind all of this, is now acting scared, hugging his wife as they get lovey-dovey, while Renee makes a face on how devilish her master is. He will stop at nothing just to get what he wants. Seeing how teary-eyed Miere is, Renee can't help but to think that he is like a leech who drains the energy of their lovely Duchess. Sure, the Duchess prefers a husband who can catch the bugs for her rather than a scaredy cat she needs to look after. The next morning, Setia wakes up with her husband sharing her pillow. When Miere blinks, he smiles at the sight of his wife staring at him while he is asleep. He then reaches for her and presses her body against his, whispering her name in his sleep. When he hears how loudly Setia's heart is beating, he realizes that he isn't dreaming at all. He pretends to stretch and rolls to the other side, while Setia keeps wondering all the possible reasons she can think of why her heart is beating so fast. And that includes the possibility of falling in love with her husband. She brushes off the thought, thinking maybe she acted that way because he called out her name. During breakfast, Setia notices that Miere's bangs are getting in the way when he eats. So she advises him to cut it, but Miere just looks for a hair clip and pins his bangs on top of his head. OMG, he looks so cute! I admit, he doesn't look devilish at all. Setia is now satisfied, looking at him as if he was an angel. She then opens up about her plan on visiting their new fiefdom to check the development of their latest farm clock and to prepare to take their chef and gardener to Chae. Also, since she's done looking over the new land, she'll be heading straight over to Chae. Miere is taken aback by her remarks, asking her once more if he hears it right. Setia explains that her visit is for the restaurant business. Miere wants to go with her, but she insists that he has a dukedom and people to protect. With a glum look on his face, he says that he isn't clever enough and that he can't do anything without her. He suddenly bursts into tears, dramatically exclaims that he might take the dukedom down with him. Here comes the drama king, everyone. Setia is now doubting if there's a possibility that the dukedom will fall into ruins in his hands given how he makes silly decisions. Also, she notices that he's been acting childishly lately. On the other hand, Miere thinks that now they're finally together after 3 long years, there's no way he's sending her alone to where Royness is. That person has been annoying him to no end, and his blood boils just thinking of the possibility that Setia might meet him in Chae. Shortly after breakfast, they receive an invitation to the ball hosted by the Duchess of Charbless. This is an opportunity to gather information about the latest trends within high society, so Setia thinks that it would be wise to mingle with other nobles straight away, given the fact that Miere has been given a dukedom. She just has to make sure that they never make fun of her husband again. Suddenly, 3 of Setia's people enter the room. One of them is her assistant, and the 2 are her secretaries. Miere's silly mind is acting up again, thinking that he is much more handsome than all of them. The catch is, very few people know about his looks. Also, it seems like Setia is being surrounded by handsome, competent men, and he finds it very annoying indeed. He then starts to criticize them one by one, only to get disappointed by his wrong assumptions. He then tells his wife to conduct their meeting within the room, telling her that he wouldn't spend another minute apart from her. Of course, he has to see whether these men have feelings for Setia or not. Sometimes, I wonder if he's kind of obsessive or just plainly out of his mind. Setia then starts their meeting about how someone purchased a lot of pillows in the market. Also, she's thinking that other nobles may be facing a similar problem. That's why it was sold out yesterday. She then orders their staff to investigate it and to find out who bought out all the pillows in the capital city. That night, Setia is still working, so Miere approaches her, telling her to rest. With his bathrobe exposing his toned body, she then grabs his robe and pulls it closer. I know you're probably thinking of something else right now, but Setia just tightens his robe to properly hide his revealing abdominal muscles, saying that she doesn't want him to catch cold. Miere laughs half-heartedly, completely disappointed by his attempt to show off. He then grabs her hand and presses it on his chest, asking what she thinks of it. Despite blushing, Setia is able to compose herself and tells him that he has some serious pecs. Miere frowns at the thought of her choice of words. He was kind of expecting her to say the word sexy, but he's definitely not one to give up so easily. In the bath, Setia can't believe she actually said that. She has a habit of concealing her emotions, but when she's alone, she easily gets flustered over him. After taking a bath, Miere offers to dry her hair while wearing his loose clothing again. In his defense, it makes him more comfortable, but on second thought, he should wear more fitting pajamas from now on. The next day, Setia receives the result of the investigation that after a mysterious person bought all the pillows in a single day, that person came back the next day and purchased all the beddings. Setia agrees that something doesn't feel right, so she further instructs her assistant to continue the investigation. It's funny how she thinks of her husband's innocence, but without knowing that she's the innocent one all along. Shortly after, the letter of appointment and their coronet commences, but there are no other people aside from them. The couple exchange compliments to each other and get lovey-dovey while ignoring the high official who administers their coronet. Seriously, this man wouldn't really care if an enemy is right in front of him as long as he can get lovey-dovey with his wife. When Setia receives the documents containing the legal rights to acquire the land in the south, she is beaming with joy, deeply pleased with the good news. The area boasts high-quality wheat and is famous for its produce. However, there's a reason why Miere initially turned down the dukedom. It is because these documents will be more complicated than the ones they dealt with in the estate. But as long as it makes Setia happy, he willingly accepts it. Back in the estate, Renee is able to purchase new pillows and beddings. Also, she informs Setia about an anonymous donation of pillows and beddings to various orphanages, specifically the ones located at the outskirts of the capital. People are referring to this mysterious donor as the Pillow Angel. Setia is rather glad that such a donor is kind-hearted enough to help those who are in need, and so she orders her informants to stop the investigation. Setia is so innocent, and Miere surely knows how to bring out that side of her. As Renee makes her way out of the mansion to see Miere, she then approaches him with a knife in her hand. As Renee raises her hand with a knife, Miere already notices it and asks why she's sneaking up on him like that. Renee is honest enough to admit that she was trying to attack him. Miere isn't paying attention to her failed attempt and asks if she did what he requested. These two keep arguing about petty matters like siblings who just want to see who gets roasted first. When Renee says that she isn't a fool like her master, Miere stops digging the ground and points the shovel at her. Seems like someone no longer values her life, huh? Miere emphasizes that it was all an act, and if she wishes to die, then he would gladly make her wishes come true. I like the bond between these two, especially how Rainey always jokes around with him. Rainey refuses to die yet, because she still wants to eat a lot of food around the world. When asked about Setia's reaction, she makes a face first, saying that the pillowy angel is actually a devil in disguise. Miere smirks at the thought, happy of his wife's reaction. He's literally the spawn of Satan. He smirks and calls Rainey for another mission. Shortly after, Miere is having trouble buttoning up his pajama top, saying that everything came in a small size. Setia drops her pen in shock. At this moment, Miere might have to sleep shirtless. He used up too much energy trying to fasten the buttons, so he rips his top off in front of her. He then fans himself as sweat drips all over his face. Setia doesn't know where to look. I mean, come on, look straight. One look wouldn't hurt, right? He approaches her and tells her to go to bed, but Setia needs a few more minutes to finish the documents. Setia's heartbeat can't be any louder as she blushes how close he is with no shirt on. How can she be that strong to suppress her emotions? Miere, on the other hand, contemplates whether to switch character and become someone clever yet innocent or not. But he can't let that happen because His Majesty would have a field day with that. However, she is focusing on work as if he doesn't exist. It reminds him of their days together at the academy. On the day they met, she was immersed in reading, even though exams were all over. Suddenly, some other guys talked about how dumb Miere was. To his surprise, Setia cursed them for talking behind his back. Then, these guys approached her and called her a name. Setia Poinet. Her name reminded him of the flower poinsettia. Surely she was a weird one, talking to a bench she used to sit on. As soon as she left, Miere crouched to the ground below the bench. His eyes widened when he found out that she compares herself to a sunset flower. He then ordered Yulaka to inform the gardener to take good care of the sunset flower in his lawn. Yulaka argued that since it's a wildflower, it would clash with the blooms in the greenhouse. But Miere happily threatened her, saying that her life depended on the flower, so if it died, so would she. Since that day, he developed a habit. He took interest in sunset flowers. Under Ulaka's care, the sunset flower started to slowly flourish. But it wasn't only the flowers that flourished. His interest in Setia started to bloom too. He noticed her everywhere in the academy and came to a conclusion. He wanted her to look at him the way he watched her. The feeling when she'd take interest in him would definitely make his heart burst. Then he started to want more. During the festival, he approached her for the first time, telling her that it was unfair of her to study while everyone was out having fun. The look on his face when she responded to him is just too cute. This is the first time he gets embarrassed without his ever-convincing act. Looking at him, Setia sighed, thinking that he must be another innocent rich boy. She continued scribbling through her paper and thought he was a fool for saying that he liked being unfair. In fact, his life was all about being unfair. Still, Setia asked him to enjoy the rest of the party, but Miere couldn't let this opportunity slide. He then told her that he preferred quiet over the noise. Setia did too, so if he wanted to take a break, she pointed at the door, indirectly telling him to get lost. Miere went out the door without arguing further. The next year during the masquerade ball, he walked up to her again, but her face showed an expression of distaste. She immediately got up and walked away past him. Ever since that day, he stopped going to the library. And now, Setia is right in front of him as his wife. The woman who used to walk away from him is now within his reach. He then tickles her while she thinks of giving him a big whack on the head for making her cry as her laughter echoes within the room. Setia plops on the couch with Miere on top of her, saying that she can't rest with him looming over her like this. At this moment, all Miere ever wants is for her to give him a moment as he leans forward, closing the gap between them. Are you thinking what I'm thinking, guys? Miere, while on top of Setia and half naked, with his muscular body exposed, asked his lady for a little moment. He leans in even closer, to the point of actually lying on top of Setia. Miere did so to comment about how she smells so good, like roses. Unfortunately, it seems like his flirting didn't work on Setia, who asks him to get up off of her, but in a rather polite way. He ends up staring at her, but he dismisses it and plops himself down near the other side of the sofa, looking a little bit dazed and awkward. Setia then asks if he's sleepy, and he replies that he must be, and Miere scuttles off into bed like a little kid. All Setia could think was that he must have been really tired since he's been speaking nonsense. In actuality, the guy's having an internal dilemma on more than one thing. Miere's dejected that Setia seems to have not taken a liking to the nightshirt he was wearing, and he feels he made a mistake thinking both of them were having a moment. But more than that, Miere is contemplating whether or not to act innocently as opposed to using his well-muscled body in attracting Setia. The only problem is, he'll come off as immature. Regardless, he's the one who made his shy-type persona, so he has to stick with it indefinitely. Still, it doesn't mean that Miere likes it, though. The following morning, Setia is awakened by Miere's embrace. All she could think about, though, was how sure she was that she placed a pillow between them last night. She needn't bother too much, though, as Miere wakes moments after her because of the alarm. Setia immediately told him that he moved over their pillow barrier again last night, to which he only credited his bad sleeping habits for that. Something tells me that he did it deliberately. Anyway, the day goes on, so Setia gets up. She approaches Rainey, the maid, and asks her about Miere's pajamas. In particular, why they were so small. Rainey can only reply that they took what the tailor gave. Still, Setia asks that they make it 2 sizes larger next time. And so the couple boarded a carriage to be transported back to the capital. Setia tells her husband that they'll be in time for the Duchess of Charbalus's ball. However, Miere's mind is on something else. He comments about how beautiful the village had gotten. Setia reveals that all the roses grown here were used to make candies and other desserts. And when Miere said he wanted to try them, she promised she would have it arranged. But as a request, Miere asks if they could enjoy it together, and so they agree to spend the afternoon together. Miere also praises Setia for doing so good in the past 3 years. He also thanks her for it and pulls her to a big hug by the time they've reached their estate. As for repaying her efforts, Setia asks if she could ask a favor, to which Miere agrees. Unfortunately, Setia remembers something Miere shouldn't see, and so she rushes off to take care of it. Frantic and rushing, Setia runs to the potted plant Miere had given her all those years ago. Now it's chipped and the flowers are a little bit dried. Still, she kept it. Even so, she realized she had nowhere to put the pot. Fortunately, but rather surprisingly, Rainey was there to ask if there's something wrong. Setia instructs her to discreetly tell the gardener to transfer the flowers to a new pot, and once that's done, put the pot back into her room. With that, Setia swiftly leaves the room as quickly as she'd come in. As soon as she's gone, though, Miere makes an appearance by the window. The Duke asks his maid why she didn't report this supposed good news to him, to which Rainey replies she didn't think he'd be interested in potted plants. That's when Miere reveals he gifted Setia that pot, beaming with delight at the thought of her keeping it despite being damaged. Rainey asks him if she has to report every little thing like that back to him, and Miere says it's important to do so since he wants to know if Setia values the things he gives her, like the pot. The maid, seemingly annoyed, agrees, so Miere leaps from the window, but not before saying Rainey's life depends on her understanding his new rule on reports. He's just joking about that threat, right? Anyway, Setia returns first to the gardens where she left Miere. Moments later, he comes running through. For a moment, Setia gets terrified thinking Miere ran into Rainey by chance, but the Duke managed to excuse himself pretty well by saying he went to the bathroom. In actuality, Setia is embarrassed just thinking about his reaction if he found out she kept his gift. Out of nowhere, Miere says he'd like to visit his grave. Even though Setia says his headstone might have been removed, he still wants to go out of curiosity. Setia takes this chance to ask him something as well, regarding the 12 bodies found at the site of his disappearance. Miere's cover for this was that the Emperor wanted to provide a genuine, authentic feel for faking the Duke's death, hence the dead bodies. With that, Miere begins his trip. Upon visiting his grave, he had the visitor's log checked, finding Setia visited him remarkably often. He rides the carriage happily, as he orders them to pass by the square before heading to the Sayana orphanage. Unfortunately, his admiration for the square's rosy scent like his wife gets interrupted by a commotion. It's a weak-looking man attempting to take his child back from the orphanage. Miere intervenes, even laughing at the man's threats and giving him one of his own. He asks the headmistress of the orphanage to leave with the child so he could talk to the man in private. Miere rightfully guessed he was a drug addict and proposed to help. Miere promises the man some opium if he can answer his questions truthfully. The offer seems to entice the old man strongly. First, Miere asks why he wants his child back, to which the man just shouts because she's his daughter. The Duke asks him not to wail out that loud, and orders his men to let the addict go from his restraint. Again, in a menacing and rather cold demeanor, Miere asks him why he wanted his child back. Finally, the man admits that he can sell his daughter for some money, and so Miere smiles at him while saying he has to discuss something with the headmistress. He did ask his men to put the addict in his carriage and supposedly take care of him. Regardless, Miere enters the orphanage and asks the headmistress everything about the man and his child. It turns out that the addict who caused the commotion earlier was also a drunkard, which is why Miere theorized no one noticed the drug, and had been beating his daughter without a thought. When the village reported it and had to take away his child, he didn't even fight it. Miere asks to meet with the child herself, and moments later, out comes a skinny girl who said she was Euve Eloni, and that she was 11 years old. Miere likens her to Rainey, who was the same age as her when he took her in. Anyway, he says that he's a man who can punish bad people, and asks Euve for someone to punish. The girl stays silent though, clearly traumatized. And so Miere asks the headmistress to give him some privacy with her. He puts down his glasses and innocently promises to never let their secret let out. Finally, the girl opens up and says she wishes her father will disappear forever. And Miere, holding his darkness at bay, says he can make that happen. Afterwards, Miere arrives back on his estate a little late, as pointed out by Setia. Miere says he was out doing a good deed. Regardless, he immediately begins to be flirty with her, making Setia thinks he's a little lively from just visiting the dead. Miere also gives Setia a beautiful gem necklace, saying he bought it because it reminded him of her. Setia is a little surprised, and asking if there's an occasion, but accepts the gift nonetheless. Tomorrow comes, and Setia visits a tradesman where she happily finds her requested item, a clock, finished in beautiful detail. She and Rainey then stroll the street and find it with an overabundance of souvenirs and knickknacks. When Rainey notices a beautiful man, Setia expresses her disinterest. Setia admits to never had a type since she was busy earning money. This leads Rainey asking her why she married Miere in the first place. Although Rainey knows Setia and Miere's marriage was contractual by nature, she's still curious as to why her lady accepted. Setia reminisces of the time Miere came to see her with the agreement, thinking about how he said he wanted a competent woman by his side. With a slight smile, Setia admits she was tempted by his offer. Of course, the deal was better than being sold off or indebted to a loan shark. However, this makes Rainey think that the innocent Setia was seduced by her evil master, fearing that he offered her money knowing her monetary problems. What's more, Miere's a sweet talker. Suddenly, Rainey's attention is caught by something. She spotted a tiny glass cat amongst the trinkets, and she couldn't hide her excitement. As she shows her lady the glass cat, Setia gets reminded of Rainey's question about her type in a man. She concludes that she wants someone to see her for who she was, just like how Rainey pulled the cat out of a pile of knickknacks. And so Setia offered to buy her the glass cat, much to Rainey's delight. They then talk about how Miere looks up close, since Setia is the only one to see him without bangs. Setia, while blushing, admits that Miere looks so angelic. With that, Rainy concludes Miere had truly tricked Setia. Rainy then grabs a devil and angel doll from the stall, saying she'd like to give it to her lady as a thanks for the glass cat earlier. Though initially refusing, Setia eventually agrees after seeing Rainy get dejected. The maid also suggested a name for the devil, which was Stir, short for Devil Stir. She suggests that Setia name the angel doll with the first name she thought of, but she thought of Miere, so she let Rainy name it again. This time, it was TT. By the time they returned, Rainy was in such high hopes. Meanwhile, Miere finds the pair of dolls sitting by the bed. He finds it cute, as it reminds him of himself and Setia. He immediately abandons them and heads straight for Setia when she enters the room, though. Miere mentions the dolls, and he seems to get shocked upon hearing the name Devil Stir. Apparently, it was also his name in the underworld, but he's sure Setia wouldn't know that. And so he comments how Rainy must have come up with that, which Setia confirms. This strikes a nerve with the Duke, who finds himself being able to tolerate Rainy's practical teasing, saying it's better than someone else's. Anyway, he credits it to a hunch, but Setia gets a feeling of deja vu, thinking she heard their conversation before. Miere then asks if it was Rainy's gift, and Setia recounts how she had to accept them because of Rainy getting sad. Imagine Miere's annoyance and jealousy, which was enough to call Rainy for a talk the next day. Rainy seems to know what's coming for her, and so she tries to excuse herself by saying she has a stomachache. However, Miere says there's a bathroom in his office. Looks like that scolding is coming either way. And so, Miere confirms that Rainy is the one to name the doll, and she did so to play a prank on him. Rainy tries to be in a more joking manner, but it seems that her master's concerns are real. Thanks to that joke, Miere fears that his true identity has been discovered by Setia. He asks Rainy if she would like for him to do the same, if she'd also like Setia to know her past. Of course, Rainy refuses. Again, Miere states how tolerant he is of Rainy and her jokes. Because if they weren't jokes, then she'd be dead right now. At least both agree to how kind, allegedly, of a master he is. Rainy then remembers that she had already completed one task assigned to her from Miere. She reports that Setia doesn't have a type. The maid relates the events of their walk earlier, how she tried to distract Setia with a handsome man passing by, but she didn't pay any attention at all. This leads Miere to think his good looks wouldn't do him good in seducing Setia, which explains how she's immune to his supposed charm. Rainy did say that Setia praised his good looks though, saying she likened his face to an angel. This boosted Miere's ego, now confident that his good looks did have an effect on his wife. Rainy still jokes how Setia should get an eye doctor though, and they have a repeat about their joke death conversation earlier. Rainy urges her master to just tell the truth that he loves her. Miere dismisses that, arguing that Setia would feel bad if she knew he lied to her, even asking Rainy's response if she was in her shoes. Miere admits he's scared because he has too much to lose. Regardless, Rainy pushes Miere to drop his stupid act, but even that he can't let go. He firmly believes Setia is staying because she thinks he's dumb. He then asks Rainy to leave, ending their talk. Moments later, a quiet rustle of the leaves can be heard, and Eli emerges from his master's window. Eli reports that the opium dealer has fled to Chae, much to the delight of Miere, who informs Eli he will be sailing there as well. While gone, Miere entrusts his estate to Eli, much to his shock. Anyway, Miere stays up for quite a while because he's been doing his work, so Setia goes to his study, telling him it's time for bed. He promises his wife he'll be done in a minute, but Setia urges him not to be too late. Glad he could ease Setia by reducing her work, Miere heads to bed. He snuggles close to Setia, bypassing their pillow barrier, only to see her awake and looking right at him. Busted! Miere could only mumble his words when he asks why Setia is still awake. She answers that she couldn't sleep knowing he was still working. But more importantly, she mentions how she thought Miere could only roll over their pillow barrier unintentionally when they slept. Looks like now's the time to turn the spotlights on Miere, as he swiftly transitions into his shy persona. He begins to cry and to look worried while saying he's afraid the assassins might come for him that night. Being attacked as a count traumatized him, and being near Setia puts him at ease. The female lead tries to comfort the supposed crying Duke, who even approached her for a hug. He even admits to himself how shameless he's acting. But even so, he gets to hug Setia, so he ultimately doesn't care. He thought how nice it would be to hug her forever, but even Miere realizes he can't act like a coward forever. Now, he thinks Setia sees him as a likable person, not someone to like. So Miere promises to protect her, but Setia questions how he could do so if he's like that all the time. Setia then urges him to take some lessons on varying subjects, like sword lessons and business and politics administration. Thinking back, Setia believes she's only there because Miere needs her to run the estate. Hence, it's better if he stayed clueless from a business standpoint. However, she wants him to be ready when their contract does run out. Setia admits to herself that she wants Miere to never be afraid again. And so she says they should get some sleep, and she turns her head away. Miere, however, stayed where he was. The Duke is thinking about all the tutoring and having to take lessons. Miere wonders how Setia could fall asleep so easily, unaware of his presence. And now he's the one having a hard time falling asleep. The next morning comes, and the couple heads to Duke Charblis's estate for his ball. There, though Miere wanted Setia to stay by his side, the latter urged the former to practice his social skills. If there's nobody he can talk to, she's sure someone else will approach him. Miere doesn't do a very good job at it, though, coming off as dumb in that sense. He hears the whispers of everyone, but all he could think of is how lucky he truly was to have Setia as a wife, even thanking her parents for how dumb they truly were. Unfortunately, he hears gossip about how he can't please Setia in bed, and when he finally found the culprit, Setia suddenly grabbed his face and pulled him in for a kiss. When she lets go, Miere seems to have forgotten where they were, or the people there, as he takes his glasses off and kisses her back. Passionately this time. Yes, it's finally happening! Even Roinus, who's in the crowd, gets shocked. After sharing their passionate kiss, Setia gasps for air, asking her husband that although she knows he wants her, maybe they should save all that for the bedroom. Upon saying that though, even Setia realizes how embarrassing the words she's been saying. Luckily, Miere leads her out into the gardens. There, he asks what had happened. Apparently, Setia had heard all the bad-mouthing the other guests had been doing behind Miere's back. The comment about his incompetence in bed bugged her dearly, and so she took him in for a kiss to get back at those people. And since it resulted in their first kiss, Miere internally agrees to let the gossipers go, even calling himself a benevolent person. Vain is more like it, but sure. Anyway, now it's Setia's turn to ask. Despite being a little shy about it, she asks why Miere had kissed her back so passionately. Though in his mind he wants to say that he's been wanting to do so for a long time, he says it was because of pure instinct and the happiness he felt when she kissed him. He also reveals it's his first kiss, causing the two to blush like a tomato. Setia, on the other hand, keeps hers a secret, even quoting Miere about lives they've lived being unfair, causing the Duke to smile. Still, it was Miere who kissed first, according to Setia, as she merely pressed her lips to his. Regardless, he doesn't play down the importance of their kiss, especially because it was in front of guys like Roinus. Eventually, Setia realizes that their kiss being important to Miere makes it seem like he has feelings for her, and so she admits it's her first time as well. He states his happiness and likens Lady Setia to a blush pink rose. Oh, just tear up the contract and get married for real already! Anyway, all this makes Setia doubt if she could leave for Chae the next day. Regardless, she'll miss Miere. The same can be said for Miere, who clung to her until it was time for her to go. Although, he asked for a kiss before she left, which she didn't bother obliging. While on the ship, Setia ponders her feelings that made her not want to ride the boat. Meanwhile, as soon as Setia's gone, Miere's glasses come off and he looks for Eli, possibly wanting to head to Chae himself right this moment. The boat sails towards Chae, carrying Setia's thoughts back to her mansion and her absent husband. As she gazes at the deep blue sea, she realizes the need to confront her emotions. In truth, Setia is in love with Miere, a kind and slightly foolish person, yet honest and innocent. On top of that, Miere is the only person who sees who she really is. Reflecting on the past, she never expected to fall for someone like him, but now she acknowledges that it must have happened long ago. Despite these feelings, Setia knows they can't endure. She cannot afford to fall in love because their contract ends in February. So she convinces herself that Miere's kindness is merely out of compassion, hoping to move on during her journey to Chae. One afternoon, while instructing Rainey to fetch documents, Setia inexplicably flinches. Uncomfortable feelings arise, but she chooses to dismiss them. In her bedroom, she recalls the previous night, Miere's lips pressing against hers and the warmth that accompanied it. Suddenly, a knock on the door startles her, and her heart races at the sight of Miere standing before her. That can't be, since she left him in the mansion, right? Setia, grappling with her emotions, believes she might be hallucinating. To regain composure, she forcefully shuts her eyes. Miere, concerned, questions her well-being. Setia, compelled by her feelings, reaches out, tenderly caressing his face. With a gentle response, she succumbs to the warmth, swiftly drifting into slumber. When she wakes up the next day, she notices that there's a stranger in her room, exposing his muscular back, a canvas of strength and grace. She checks herself first and is relieved that nothing happened between them. Suddenly, she retrieves her hidden weapon beneath the pillow as the man shifts, facing the ceiling. Thinking she's still in a dream, Setia is astonished to see Miere half naked beside her. Hold on, guys. We'll pause for a minute and scan this part. Honestly, this body is so perfect. Setia, still questioning reality, continues to press Miere's face, hoping to dispel any illusion and reassure herself. Miere responds with a slight groan, but Setia's desire to touch his lips persists. She remembers upon Miere's confession that his kiss was instinctive. Setia confesses that the feeling was mutual. The happiness of sharing her first kiss with him overwhelms her, so in a moment of newfound emotions, Setia's body moves instinctively, attempting to kiss Miere, who, unbeknownst to her, is already awake. Miere holds her face, inquiring if she's trying to force herself upon him. Dazed and bewildered, Setia is shaken by Miere in an attempt to snap her out of her shock. In this moment, the realization hits her that Miere's presence is no dream or product of her imagination. It's real. Seeking an excuse to mask her embarrassment, Setia claims she's caught in a dream where she witnessed him falling into an endless slumber, and only a kiss could rouse him. Miere gazes at her for a moment, and against her fervent hope, he appears to buy into her explanation, believing what she said. Though, I'm pretty sure he knows she's lying because she's a bad actress. Setia, curious about the estate and Miere's work, seeks reassurance. Miere, with a calm demeanor, assures her that everything is under control, even arranging for someone to stand in for him during his absence. And he did all these things so he could be with her, seemingly not wanting to separate from her again. Setia is getting red as she tightens her grip on the sheets, stating that Miere is being straightforward with his feelings. Unbeknownst to her, the reality is quite the opposite. Since the loss of Miere's parents, his life has been entangled in a web of lies. He crafted a false identity to avenge his family, deceiving nobles and the royal family in the process. Now he's pretending to be someone else, all in an attempt to avoid losing Setia. I understand that he doesn't want her to leave him, but our Setia deserves to know the truth. I hope it'll turn out fine. Suddenly, Miere shifts the conversation, probing Setia about her genuine feelings for him. Setia, embracing honesty, admits that initially she considered him a bit foolish. However, she recognizes his angelic beauty and kind heart. Though she can't deny her genuine love for him, she chooses to keep it a secret. In a surprising turn, Miere confesses that he was initially captivated by Setia's work, and like a wildflower appearing unexpectedly, he found himself developing deeper feelings for her. Upon hearing his admission, Setia's face flushes with embarrassment, unaware that Miere has fallen for her as well. This time, with a shy smile and blushing cheeks, Setia openly confesses that she's in love with him too. She's so adorable that even Miere can't contain her cuteness. Later that day, Miere savors the sea breeze, but Rainey observes a change in his demeanor toward the sailors. He directs them sternly, assigning a heavy workload. This sudden shift in behavior follows Miere, overhearing the sailors comparing him unfavorably to Roynus. The sailors seem to prefer Setia ending up with Roynus, citing Miere's lack of fashion sense and appeal. In response, Miere, irritated by their comments, demonstrates the consequences of angering him by ordering them around like dogs. Meanwhile, in her office, Setia grapples with the impact of Miere's confession. What began as a fake couple has evolved into something different, now that their feelings are mutual. Contemplating the future, a loud thud startles her, injecting an unexpected jolt into her thoughts. It turns out Rainey dozed off and accidentally bumped her head on the wall. Setia, showing concern, instructs her to apply some ointment to her head. As Rainey hurries out of the room, she encounters Miere, who appears to be in a better mood. Rainey suspects that he might be jealous of being with Setia as a servant, but Miere dismisses the idea, adopting a cocky demeanor, mentioning Setia's recent confession. Rainey, noticing that his smiles are even creepier than usual, points out that the divorce hasn't been called off, indicating that nothing has changed. In response, Miere insists that he won't allow it to happen because, in his view, they are already a genuine couple. Unfazed, Rainey jokingly suggests pushing him down the stairs since nobody wants to be married to a dimwit forever. Miere, with a playful demeanor, pinches her cheeks and reminds her to behave if she wants to live. With that, Rainey exits, harboring the intention to eventually reveal the truth to Setia. As much as I want to, it would be better if Miere tells her the truth. In her office, Setia inquires about Rainey's well-being, but is taken aback when she feels a kiss on her head. Apologizing for mistaking him as Rainey, Setia is surprised by Miere's presence. Miere, noticing Setia working late, encourages her to go to bed. Leaning in, he whispers his desire to share the bed with her. Startled, Setia abruptly stands up and slams the door behind her, making it clear that she has turned him down. Later that night, Rainey, occupied with her cat figurines, hears footsteps in the corridor. Prepared to grab her weapon, she is surprised when Setia requests to share the bed with her. While Rainey has no issue with it, she discerns Miere's signal, indicating harm if she agrees. Feeling trapped, Rainey has no choice but to decline. Just then, Miere emerges from behind the wall and extends his hand to Setia, urging her to go to bed. Rainey realizes that Miere approaches love like an assassin, maneuvering in the late hours of the night, a perfect time to accomplish his goals. She recalls Miere's words about the life of an assassin, emphasizing the importance of striking when the target's guard is down, or doing whatever is necessary to achieve the goal if the opportune moment doesn't present itself. No wonder they call him the Devil's Stir. Meanwhile, as they head to their room, Miere wears a somber expression and pleads with Setia not to distance herself. Setia, on the other hand, isn't actually trying to push him away. It's just that it's getting late and the idea of being alone with him in an enclosed space suggests something else. Setia takes a deep breath before withdrawing from Miere's touch. Unfazed, Miere smiles and suggests heading to bed, expressing a wish for Setia to touch him as she did before. As Setia drifts into a deep sleep, Miere turns to face her, contemplating the need for a proper proposal. He decides to take things slowly, not wanting to frighten her. Meanwhile, at the estate, Miere's imposter, growing bored with the charade, wonders how Miere manages to keep up the act for a decade without losing his sanity. As he's about to sleep on the sofa, he remembers how Miere warned him not to sleep on the bed, or else he'd kill him over and over again. In the midst of his complaints, the imposter detects 2 assassins in the room, a revelation Miere failed to disclose. Understanding the reason for his selection, he calmly deals with the intruders, effortlessly dispatching them one by one. It may be Miere's body, but this knight is just as cool as he is. Meanwhile, in Chae, Miere's enthusiasm to pursue the opium dealer is interrupted by the ship's crew announcement that they have arrived in Puhan. Setia, anticipating a busy day with the merchant group, informs Miere of her plans, expecting him to accompany her. However, Miere expresses a desire to go sightseeing instead. Don't fall for it, Setia. He still hasn't grown up, so don't get your hopes up. Just as Setia separates from them, Miere instructs her knights to disperse throughout the area, excluding Joe. Once Miere identifies their target area, he assigns the task to Joe, to find a gift for Setia. For a moment, I thought they were going to make a move towards their target. Joe, being quite popular with the ladies, has a good understanding of what women like. Recognizing Joe's expertise, Miere thought it would be wise to have him assist in selecting a gift for Setia. Upon entering the store, Joe starts browsing, while Miere requests the rarest and most expensive item available. Joe, noting Setia's preference for practical items, begins to protest. Before he can utter another word, Miere's expression shifts, questioning whether Joe has been daring enough to look at Setia in Miere's absence. Miere asserts that he never gave such an order. Leaning in closer, Miere whispers that even he himself doesn't dare to look at Setia, yet Joe dared to discern what she likes while Miere was away. We need the medics, guys! Joe argues that he had no hidden agenda and merely happened to notice what Setia liked. As the tension escalates, Miere intervenes by asking the store clerk for something that would appeal to a businesswoman, something rare, expensive, and practical. Continuing his admonition, Miere emphasizes to Joe that he does not want him looking at Setia in any way, intentional or not, expressing his deep anger about it. Joe, with a sigh of relief, is grateful that he won't face immediate consequences. When the store clerk returns with various items, Miere specifically inquires about a purple bracelet, an extravagant tafta worth 45 billion yuan. thinking that it doesn't look expensive that Setia would doubt, he purchases it together with the jade earrings. Joe is aware that Setia doesn't have pierced ears, but mentioning it would likely anger Miere again. But if they end up buying something she doesn't need, Miere will get angry and take it out on them. That's a tough one you got there, Joe. Hang in there. When Joe decides to speak up, Miere is already aware, finding it yet another trait he finds attractive in Setia. Determined to get her a gift she'll like, Miere decides that if Setia doesn't want to pierce her ears, he'll wear the earrings himself. After all, he wants a piercing that reminds him of Setia's jade eyes. So he doesn't mind wearing a couple's earrings on his own as long as Setia is by his side. What matters is that he's wearing the earrings while thinking of her. That night, Miere knocks and excitedly bursts the door open to greet Setia with a hug. After that, he shows her all the souvenirs that he purchased just for her. But he freezes when Setia tells him that she doesn't need anything and it's just a waste. Miere clenches his fists while looking away. He regrets not getting her anything since he was gone for 3 years, so he wants to compensate for it. Setia, understanding his sentiment, asks him to show her what he got. As Miere displays his purchases, he finally introduces the bracelet. Setia notices his hesitation and nervousness. Upon unwrapping the bracelet, her first concern is its cost. Miere reassures her, downplaying its expense, and promises to get her something fancier next time. As if it isn't expensive enough? That's a deeper grave you're digging, Miere. Still, he can't believe how Setia refuses a gift from a lover. As he wraps the bracelet around her wrist, Setia, perceptive as ever, inquires about its cost due to its luxurious appearance. Miere once again fabricates a story, but inwardly, he's pleased to see it compliment her even better than he had imagined. Setia notices that it is the same color as Miere's eyes, and that's exactly why he purchased it. He wants to mark her, signaling to the world that she belongs to him. And so Miere hugs her, making a request for her not to take off the bracelet. Acknowledging that others may know more about Setia than he does, he whispers boldly, urging her to reveal a part of herself that no one else has ever seen before. Something only he knows. I know you guys are thinking of something else too. On a night like this, with only the two of them, Setia's face flushes as Miere holds her in his arms. She finds herself speechless, her heart racing in the moment. Suddenly, Miere plants a tender kiss on her forehead and gently rubs her wrist where the bracelet rests. He suggests they go to bed, with the thought in mind that no one else will ever have her because she is already his. When Miere leaves to change into his nightly clothes, Setia's face betrays her embarrassment, realizing that Miere was simply suggesting they go to sleep. Setia flops onto the bed, feigning sleep by the time Miere returns. He gently brushes her hair and whispers a goodnight, expressing the hope that she dreams of him as he did last time. Though Setia pretends to be asleep, Miere can see through her act. The following morning, Miere holds hands with Setia, bravely facing his fear of getting his ears pierced. The knights, aware of his assassin background, avert their gaze, unwilling to witness the vulnerable side of their master. If I were one of the knights, I would probably be dead by now for laughing too hard. When Miere notices that one of his knights left, he just hopes that they're ready to face the consequences. Expressing the pain of the piercing, he refuses to let go of Setia's hand during her turn, warning the person not to cause her any distress. Miere, teary-eyed, assures Setia that everything will be all right and glares at the piercer, hinting a dire consequence if Setia experiences pain. To everyone's surprise, Setia doesn't feel anything during the procedure. In fact, it hurts her more to see Miere in pain. Just then, Setia informs everyone that they'll be heading south in the next 3 to 4 days. Miere suggests he can manage on his own during her work, and Setia feels proud of his growing maturity. However, as soon as he hugs her and refuses to let go like a child, Setia reconsiders her earlier praise. The knights struggle with the cheesy atmosphere too. Miere playfully reminds Setia that she forgot something, kissing him goodbye. Unable to handle the situation, Rainey dashes off, leaving the knights to endure the awkwardness of their master, who insists on a rough and passionate farewell kiss. This is literally a public display of affection. Are we going to witness something here? As Miere gently rubs her lips with his thumb, Setia, unable to contain the tension, reaches for his face and kisses him. She then promptly slams the door, accusing him of being shameless. Miere, aware of his actions, is actually trying to tone it down. Rainey and another knight enter, delivering the news that the investigation might take longer since the opium dealer seems to move at night. Bored, Miere instructs them to rest for the night to continue the operation after dark. Rainy, curious, asks about Miere's plans for considering the possibility of Setia rejecting his confession. Observing from a distance, Rainy notes that Miere has been charging towards Setia like a bull, while Setia fends off his advances. Rainy finds it unusual for Miere not to accompany Setia these days, wondering if he has decided to stop acting foolish. Though Miere has been restraining himself to avoid suffocating Setia, Rainy advises him to maintain his composure. Setia is sensitive, and if he treats her like a subordinate, she may run away without looking back. Miere goes silent for a moment, but proceeds to spy on Setia, which is against the law even if they're lovers. Up on a tree, he keenly observes how lovely she is. If he was the wind, he would be able to caress her body that would fluster her even more. Suddenly, he realizes that Setia is already gone in the library. Setia heads to a tailor shop to purchase outfits for her husband. The tailor is shocked, thinking Setia remarried, but she clarifies that her husband came back from the dead. The tailor, aware of Royness' long-standing affection for Setia, is astonished, realizing he now has no choice. As Setia hands over Miere's measurements, the tailor calls someone named Precious to come out. To Setia's surprise, this person has long silverish blue hair and a pretty face, leading her to assume it's a woman. However, Precious turns out to be a he named Verdo, a designer with a keen eye for fashion. To avoid penalties and breaching the contract, Verdo must dress like a girl as per the tailor's orders. When Verdo asks for more details about Miere to design suitable outfits, Setia describes his eyes as the same color as her bracelet. Verdo then notices it's a tafta worth at least 40 billion yuan. Setia shivers, realizing her bracelet is worth more than her parents' debt, recalling why Miere was hesitant and nervous when giving it to her. She thinks that maybe he doesn't want her to return it, but it's way too expensive for her. Outside, Miere eavesdrops in their conversation and is now panicking because Setia found out about the bracelet. Now what should he do? Setia appreciates Miere's honesty about his feelings, but if he continues to disappoint her, she's adamant about leaving a dim-wit like him. Though Miere can't bear the thought of that happening, he acknowledges Setia's capacity for such actions. Left with no choice, Miere decides to issue a genuine apology. In the afternoon, while in the carriage, Miere squeezes Setia's hand and confesses that he lied about the bracelet. Surprisingly, Setia isn't bothered by the admission. In fact, she expected him to make excuses for the lie, but he chose honesty instead. Nice move, Miere. Setia reflects on her parents' tendency to blame their children for their own wrongdoings, making Miere's admission of fault refreshing. She assures him that it's okay, believing he must have had a reason for his actions. She expresses gratitude that he thought of her when he saw the bracelet and confesses that she does like it, appreciating its reminder of his purple eyes. Despite the sentiment, Setia contemplates returning the bracelet. However, the thought of parting with the reminder of Miere's eyes makes her hesitant. She warns him that the next time he buys something expensive and lies about it, she will break their contract and sell the bracelet to cover the penalty. Miere promises not to repeat the mistake, and Setia refrains from scolding him, making him fall for her even more. Meanwhile, at sea, a red-haired assassin, Bianca Norley, suffers from motion sickness. Spotting land brings her relief, and it's revealed that she's Miere's trustworthy ally. Hours later, Rainy encounters Bianca while working, wearing a horrified expression as to why Bianca is in Chae. Early in the morning, Rainy knocks on Miere and Setia's room. When she enters with a particular grin plastered on her face, Miere could tell that she had something up her sleeve. Why else would she be smiling in such a way? Rainy announces that His Grace, Miere, had a guest waiting for him. As he and Setia make their way to the hallway, he puts on another public display of affection. Although Setia doesn't entirely dislike it, she still feels quite embarrassed when people witness their kiss. But that's exactly why Miere did it in the first place. With a haughty smile, he acknowledges the presence of Royness Xiao in the hallway. Look at him trying to make Royness jealous! Miere enters the sitting room to greet his guest, however, he immediately clenches his features when he sees who it is. Before him sits Bianca Norley, the vice master of the assassin group and apparently someone who openly admires Miere. Bianca delights seeing him, however, the same cannot be said for Miere. After a series of playful banter between them, matters get serious when Bianca informs Miere that Eli was attacked. Since Eli is tasked to serve as Miere's coy, The attack means that nobles or even assassin groups are after Miere's life. As the group wraps up their conversation, Setia suddenly enters the room. Hearing that her husband had a guest, she merely wanted to introduce herself. Without delay, Bianca gets up from his chair and kisses Setia's hand as a greeting. The act immediately makes Miere's blood boil. LOL, I just know he did that on purpose to get on Miere's nerves. Bianca introduces himself as Anju Vita, one of the knights who protected Miere while he was in hiding. Hearing this, Setia offers him her warmest greetings for being there for Miere. Before they could chat more, a maid informs Setia that she had a visitor, thus cutting her time with them short. When Setia leaves the room, Miere hastily follows suit, even requesting Rainy to accompany him. He intercepts Setia in the hallway and he kisses her hand before she could leave. After all, her hand deserved to be cleansed after Bianca's kiss earlier. Possessive as ever, he tells her that only he and nobody else could lay their lips on her. In a quick motion, he pulls Setia and kisses her deeply. Seeing this, Rainy could only revolt at her master's tactics. Poor Rainy, Miere really just called her just so she could cringe at all this lovey-dovey act. Miere's actions may be childish, but it leaves Setia blushing like the reddest rose. Roynus Xiao appears in the hallway where Miere and Setia are. Apparently, he is Setia's visitor. Initially, he wanted his visit to be a surprise, but he didn't realize that Miere would be tagging along. Oh, wow. Talk about awkward. The three of them make their way to the sitting room, and it's undeniable that the tension and bloodlust between Miere and Roynus is hard to miss. It did not occur to Roynus that Setia would be visiting Chae with her husband. Hearing this, Miere emphasizes how much he missed his wife, so much so that he never wants to part with her again. What a sly duke. He's really putting on a show there. In all their exchanges, both men seem to be competing for Setia. When Roynus finally mentions the intention of his seeing Setia, he discloses that he wishes to join her for lunch. Unfortunately, she already has prior plans. Seeing how his wife seems to be busy with work, Miere offers to entertain Roynus in her absence. Although she has a bad feeling about it, she concedes as she has more work to do. Alone with each other, both try to be as civil as possible. However, loving the same person proves to be a challenge as the growing tension becomes more obvious. Breaking the ice, Roynus asks how Miere and Setia met. Miere ponders on the tricky question. He has to be careful with his details. He divulges that they first met during the masquerade ball in the academy, although it was unbeknownst to Setia that it was him under the mask. He continues on that it was like destiny for them, as later on they met again in an employment agency where he helped Setia through her hard times. I mean, that's one way of putting their whole contractual marriage. As Miere recounts all this, in his mind he wanders down memory lane. His assassins had just found a perfect match for someone to work with their plans. She had exceptional credentials, which is why they found her fit for the role. Curious, Miere reviews the paperwork and finds that it is Setia who they are eyeing. Miere finds out about her situation and her struggle for freedom from her parents. He contemplates on the matter. For him, Setia was someone who deserved to shine and achieve great things, so if she were in a slump now, he'd have no second thoughts on helping her. After all, in a month's time, their plans would be executed and he'd be announced as deceased to the public. Should he fail his mission, he would find great joy in just knowing that she'd remember him. Snapping himself back to reality, he mentions that although he and his wife have different personalities, they are still compatible in many areas. This guy really takes any chance he gets to spite Roynus. Unlike a happily married Miere, Roynus discloses how his situation is more of a one-sided love. Hearing this, Miere indulges him by complimenting how popular he probably is with others. Quick as ever, Roynus replies that unfortunately, he isn't popular with the one he loves. A subtle smirk graces Miere's face, but immediately vanishes when Roynus speaks again. He remarks that he feels his feelings would be reciprocated anytime soon. Wait, what? Miere is taken aback, and for a moment, it is as if the world stopped for a while. Was Setia falling in love with Roynus? Miere couldn't believe he heard such a thing. What did Roynus mean by that? Was he secretly threatening his life with that statement? He grins at a smiling Roynus from across the table. As he eyes him, he figures that his friendly demeanor is most definitely just a facade. What are the chances that Eli, who was pretending to be Miere, would be attacked as soon as Setia left for Chae? Nobody from Alair would dare attack him in fear of getting on His Majesty's bad side. Yet someone still dared an attempted assassination on him. He pieces out his details and realizes that Roynus was in Alair that day that Eli was attacked. It's unmistakable. Miere's assassin instincts are tingling. He's sure that Royness is behind the attack. With another grin, he congratulates Royness and likewise displays a friendly look. Back in his room, Miere thinks of all the ways he could get rid of Royness. Wow, he must really hate him for him to think of more than 3 ways to eradicate him. Suddenly, Setia barges into the room and feels apologetic for intruding while he was resting. He jolts upright to greet Setia and she calls him to lunch. Hearing this, Miere is confused. Didn't Setia turn down Royness' invitation for lunch because she said she had a prior engagement? As it turns out, Setia merely declined Royness' offer as she wants to have lunch with Miere. This makes Miere blush and smile. Miere is so cute when he turns red. Before the two head out for lunch, Miere takes Setia's hand and asks a favor from her. He wishes for her to refer to him by his first name. She is stunned by his request. To refer to him by his first name would be so intimate. Just thinking about it makes her fluster and blush profusely. Hesitantly, it takes a while for both of them to use each other's names. When Miere calls her Setia, the blood rush to her cheeks are impossible to hide. Likewise, hearing Setia refer to him as Miere, he could hardly control himself as he blushes and pulls her close to him. The guy is obsessed with her. Look, he's as red as a tomato. Later that afternoon, Miere meets with Rainey, Bianca, and the rest of his team. They inform him that they've located the opium dealer they were tracking. As Miere sends his team to track the source, he halts and calls for a division. He declares that only 6 will go, while Bianca and 3 others will remain with him. Hearing this, everyone is curious about the situation. Sating their curiosity, he tells them that someone had dared to provoke him and that the team may have to defend themselves against the assassins of Chae. The air around them seems to have turned ominous as Miere tells them to ready themselves to hunt. Ooh, we'll be seeing a showdown of brute assassin force for sure! A look of worry flashes on Rainey's face. The hunting game is when they purposely release their prey to gather information on them. Could it be that their master, Miere, has found out something worrisome? It seems like serious trouble is brewing around the corner. After dismissing his fellow assassins, Miere heads out to his and Setia's quarters. As they go to bed, he cannot help but want to be closer to his wife. To his contempt, she blows off all his attempts, from moving closer to asking for a kiss. Persistent as ever, he keeps pestering her with his request. Soon enough, she allows him to give her a single kiss. With no delay, he plants a kiss on her, making both of them blush profusely. They're so cute together. They're like teenagers who had just fallen in love. Later that night, Miere awakes and joins his fellow assassins. Despite their behest, he still stays with them. It would do the opposition well that Miere taught them a lesson that he's no easy target. As one of his teammates scouts the premises, the assassins of Chae immediately make their move against Miere. He may be up against 2 assassins, but that doesn't mean he's losing. In quick strides and precise movements, Miere takes down the first assassin with blue hair. The only one left to take care of is the female assassin. With a clean slice, he's able to end her life with no trouble. That's our Duke, all right. He's not as weak as everyone thinks. But as soon as the woman falls to the ground, Miere's sword falters at the sight before him. Standing before him and witnessing all the bloodshed is none other than his wife, Setia, who had awoken from the commotion. No! The clanging of his sword is heard. Silence engulfs the blood-stained hallway where Miere and Setia are in. With wide eyes and shaky breath, she takes in the sight before her. Calling out for him, she could hardly believe that he had done all this. Oh no, I didn't expect Setia to find out about his identity like this. There are nights when suddenly you wake up for no reason. Tonight, as fate would have it, Setia would experience that. As Setia sits awake in her chambers, she realizes that Miere was no longer beside her. Thinking much of his absence, she gets up and tries to look for him, but suddenly, noises from outside her bedroom catch her attention. Curious as to what the commotion could be, she opens her bedroom door and is greeted by a gruesome sight. 2 people lay still and lifeless before her, and at the center of the bloodbath stands her husband, Miere. That must have been a horrifying sight for her. Not knowing what to make of all this, she retreats back into her room and shuts the door. It all seems like a dream to her. Surely that isn't the same Miere she admired for his innocence, right? Over and over she tells herself that what she witnessed isn't real. Or perhaps it's just that she doesn't want it to be real. Alone in her room, she cries everything out as she rethinks their whole relationship and rethinks Miere's entire identity. No, I hope she won't leave him. Let him explain, please. Outside the room, Miere stills himself as the events sink in. Setia has seen him kill a person. She looks so shaken and shocked. As he leaves the scene, he cleans up and reflects on the earlier events. He planned to tell her everything. It's just that he was scared she'd push him away, but not everything is too late. Rainey barges into the quarters Miere retreated to. In tears, she expresses her worry of Setia leaving the Lunaria household. He reassures her that she should trust him. He plans to come clean about everything from this moment onwards. Finally, he would tell her everything. Miere, you better do everything you can to keep her. As he thinks of a way to tell Setia everything, his mind wanders back to the past. For the sake of the mission, he had to pretend to be a complete fool so nobody would suspect him. He had to carry everything in secrecy, even having to hide the fact that he was alive. But one day, upon receiving a letter that Setia was going to attack the bandits' hideout, he simply couldn't stop himself from seeing her. He observed her from afar, worried that her life might be at risk. When danger came close, he was just about to intervene to protect her, but she proved not to need his help when she put the bandit to his demise. Upon going back into hiding, Miere was met with the prince's fury for his rash actions. He looks like he's ready to chew Miere out. Secrets are meant to be kept, especially when it's your existence being kept a secret. The prince could hardly believe that Miere had gone out to see Setia. The guy's in love. There's no stopping him when it comes to his beloved. The glare he directed at him could have shot daggers out of his eyes. Miere was truly too much to handle. This little incident of theirs was enough to prompt the prince to threaten Miere's exclusion should he continue to behave irrationally. Although Miere was against all this, he still understood the gravity of his actions. But love really does drive him crazy. Being raised by a mother who was abandoned by her husband, of course, the prince had no idea how love felt. Ultimately, he interjects that not a single peep should come out of Miere until coronation day. Snapping himself back to reality, he fixes his resolve in telling Setia the truth. Rainey remarks that for the first time, she doesn't trust him. Once more, he reassures a crying Rainey to trust that he can fix things between Setia and himself. You better! Later that night, he makes his way back to their quarters. At first, she doesn't react when he climbs back to bed, but as soon as he settles down, she sits upright and turns to confront him. How could he lie to her about such things? He feigned innocence and purity, things she loved most about him, and now all of it seemed like a lie. With so much conviction, she asks him why he lied to her. Hearing her voice almost break, he keeps silent for a moment before answering. She is his only weakness. Where should he even begin? His whole life was almost a lie. How will he even answer truthfully without making her run for the hills afterwards? Finally, he speaks and tells her the truth. He begins telling her about his capabilities of killing. Not just insects, but humans too. Very carefully, he explains how the ones he got rid of earlier were assassins sent to kill him. After the first batch of assassins failed to kill him back in Alair, now they were able to track him in Chae. She is alarmed at the fact that assassins were sent after him. Who would do such a thing? Well, I guess it's a good thing that she's still worried. It means she still cares for Miere somehow. He proceeds to tell her that they're still unsure of who's behind the attacks. He admits that he hasn't been completely honest about his identity either. Yeah, that's pretty obvious. But he loves Setia too much. He wants to be with her no matter what. But how could she believe in him after everything that's happened? Before Miere continues to explain everything, he asks her if she hates him now, knowing that he's capable of assassinating people. Her eyes widen at his question, and for a moment, she is speechless. Could it be that she hates him now? The silence between them is deafening. Finally, Setia speaks. She too has done her fair share of killing, both bugs and human alike. Although she's not proud of it, sometimes it's necessary when you're in a situation that threatens your life. I like how she understood that part about him. I really didn't expect that. What could Miere do if he were up against assassins? Of course, it's kill or be killed. But Setia ponders on the most important question. How could he lie to her? He loved you, that's why, but yes, it was still wrong of him. Miere's expression contorts slightly. Again, he thinks of where to begin, but for her, he would do his best to explain everything, even if it means digging up his past. Oh, I love it when we get to know about his past. At a young age, Miere had been exceptional at his studies. So much so that even His Highness in the past complimented his wits. See? He's not really a dimwit. Aside from being intelligent, he was known for his charm. However, he hated that part about himself. People would stalk him, maids would creep up on him in his sleep, all because they found him to be so handsome. It was unsettling to experience all that as a child. The death of Miere's parents took a great toll on him. His Highness had explained that although it was made out to be a carriage accident, the Emperor and Empress were behind it. Together, both young men decided to avenge their families. They would execute their plans in secret. Miere would have to make sure nobody suspected him. Geez, that must have been a lot of pressure on a little boy. At age 11, Miere had approached a reputable assassin in the underworld. Since he refused to assassinate the Emperor and Empress, he decided to be the assassin's apprentice instead. He would train harder than anyone so that he may bequeath death and vengeance by his own blade. As he trained in the Assassin's Guild, he met Bianca shortly. They were 7 years apart, and he had always thought that he was a weird one. Nonetheless, the two got along despite the constant quarreling and annoyance. Even though Bianca annoys him, deep down he knows he's a dependable and skilled assassin. Assassins had to hide their identities if they were to make it out in the real world. Where Bianca was an actor, Miere was a count, student, and assassin in one. Finally, at age 15, he received his first solo mission as an assassin. Oh, I wonder what his mission will be. So guys, what do you think of this story so far? Please subscribe and turn on notifications for updates on this and all our other stories, so you can be the first to find out when they're out. Thank you so much for your support. See you in the next one!